So, this is the new OnePlus 9, and this is the new OnePlus 9 Pro. And they might just be the best value phones in 2021. Let's get into it. 10 out of 10 presentation box, I gotta say. This thing was so heavy that I would have only been half surprised if it was just filled with rocks. But no, as soon as you open it, this enormous spaceman poster reveals itself. This will make more sense later, and then we have the OnePlus 9 and the OnePlus 9 Pro. There's also a drawer underneath, which just shows a couple of the cases you can get. The first being carbon fiber, which, to be honest, I think really works in terms of texture. But then there's also a classic OnePlus sandstone one, which by comparison just feels a little scratchy. Plus, a 50-watt wireless charger. Yeah, it's a chunky bit of kit, but at the same time, not many phones can wirelessly charge at 50 watts, so it's impressive. But all that stuff's just a bit of fun. The only thing that really matters here is the retail boxes, what you get if you buy one of these. So, this is the OnePlus 9, you get a little manual up top, there's the phone, and then apart from earphones, which OnePlus has never given, it's the full package. You get a clear case with a bit of texture, a red USB-C cable, and a 65-watt charger. And then we've got the Pro, which is a very similar package, so we won't do the whole thing again. But the one difference is that instead of clear, with the Pro, you get a matte opaque case. And thanks to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Okay, here's the thing with OnePlus. For the last 5 years, they've just been extremely easy phones for me to recommend. They're cheaper than the competition, they've still had top-end specs, and they've run on software that's both slick and intuitive for non-techies, but also with enough depth for people who are looking for it. And that mentality hasn't changed this time round. Like, bearing in mind that the OnePlus 9 starts at £629 here in the UK, which makes it about 20% cheaper than Samsung's base S21, you're getting a lot of stuff here. Like, both the 9 and the 9 Pro have a Snapdragon 888 chipset, with performance that actually comes out slightly higher than that of a Galaxy S21 Ultra in an isolated test. But like that phone does also fall with persistent usage. They both got 120Hz Fluid AMOLED displays, dual stereo speakers, which I'd give like an A- to. They're not the best, but they're also definitely not the worst. 4,500 mAh batteries, wireless charging plus wireless reverse charging, and Warp Charge 65T, which is 65-watt charging, but optimized to be able to fully charge from 1 to 100 in 29 minutes. I was a bit confused though, why they were giving me a 1 to 100 figure. So I tested it myself, and if you're charging from 0 to 100, which is probably the more likely scenario, it's more like 33 minutes. Still, very rapid though. And then we've got the 9 Pro, which for $829 has a few things that separate it from the normal 9. I'd say a few things. It's actually one of the biggest jumps I've ever seen between a Pro and a non-Pro phone. So, 15-watt wireless charging on the 9 becomes 50-watt. The Pro has an official IP68 rating, and aluminium on the sides instead of, well, glorified plastic. It's got a better display. The flat 1080p panel becomes a brighter 1440p 10-bit color curved adaptive panel, which, as you probably know at this stage, can scale its refresh rate down based on the app you're in to save a bit of battery. I know some people don't like curved screens, but I do think in this case it helps the phone to look a bit more premium, whilst also making gestures a little easier on the fingers. However, it does have slightly worse viewing angles than the normal 9. But it's the cameras too. The Pro has a next-generation main sensor, capable of shooting 4K video at 120 FPS versus 60. And also the addition of an optical zoom camera on the back, a laser autofocus module on top, and an extra microphone, which can help to reduce background noise when you're picking up vocals. So that's a lot. In fact, both these phones, they've got a grand spec sheet, and they're so fast that they almost accustom you to everything happening at the snap of a finger. But for the most part, we've seen this before. 120Hz refresh rates are kind of an industry standard at this point. 65-watt charging is old news. We've seen even bigger camera sensors than these, and is it just me or does this OnePlus 9 Pro display look like a 100% carbon copy of the Oppo Find X3 Pro display that I looked at a few weeks ago? That was rhetorical. I'm telling you, they are basically the same. But that's okay. If you can deliver what your competitors are doing for less money, then that's a good thing. And to be honest, that's probably better for most consumers than just adding a load of features in on top just for the sake of it. Plus, it's not like you're just getting the basic shell of a phone with some good specs. These have character. I wouldn't say they look as premium and confident as the S21 Ultra, but there's not a huge gap. The camera lenses are well defined, everything's wrapped in a slick chrome accent to make each component feel purposeful, and the general colours on these phones are pleasant is probably the right word. So every option on the 9 and the 9 Pro is inspired by calm, which gives them these really soft color palettes that, while they're probably not exciting enough to elicit a change in underwear, they do feel distinct. Like this one at its core is lilac, but you can also see pinks, you can see reds, you can see yellows. And both of these phones have a very subtle gradient. They're like mirrors at the bottom, which kind of fog up as you go higher. I would say it's a refreshing idea if it weren't for the fact that they were covered in fingerprints 5 seconds after unboxing them. Thanks for that. I'd strongly recommend the matte options if you're considering going caseless. But you get the idea. OnePlus has spent years building this reputation of creating high-end on an upper mid-range budget. And I mean this as a compliment when I say that the 9 and the 9 Pro haven't really strayed from that. Apart from one thing, Hasselblad branded camera systems. Let me be very clear about this. Hasselblad is a high-end camera brand. We're talking the kind of company who makes $50,000 cameras, $10,000 lenses, and even $100 cables. And so it kind of seems like a weird match for a company whose main selling point is price. But I think it's an indication that OnePlus wants to change that over the next few years. They want to become their own standalone premium brand, with their own standalone premium prices. But that doesn't change the fact that for now, these are affordable. These are pretty much the most affordable pieces of tech you can get with the Hasselblad brand name on them. So it's not surprising that OnePlus is slapping that name everywhere. All these space-themed teasers the phones had, that astronaut on the box, those are referencing Hasselblad, and how Hasselblads were the first cameras to be taken to the moon. You'll see Hasselblad on the retail box, the camera app itself is inspired by Hasselblad design, it's inscribed on the back of every phone, it was even on the instruction manual. And I will give them this, it at least makes these phones feel more premium. You get a Hasselblad-themed Pro mode, you get an optional Hasselblad watermark on your photos, you get their signature orange shutter button, which is made to sound like one of their high-end cameras. It's very satisfying to use. And I think just the fact that Hasselblad is a more respected name in the camera space than OnePlus is, naturally means that this association is going to bring up the perception of OnePlus's phones. But I think that's pretty much the extent of this collaboration. And if you are enjoying this video, then a sub to the channel would be hassle-free? So on one hand, these are good cameras. Even for the standard OnePlus 9, the main 48 megapixel sensor is the one that we used to get in the Pro phone last year. And for the most part, it's as crispy and snappy as you'd want in an upper mid-range 2021 camera. With a couple of luxuries, like a flagship-grade ultra-wide camera. Actually, the same ultra-wide camera that the £1,099 Find X3 Pro was bragging about. Remember, this phone is 629, and even though it's still a little laggy, the fact that we've got two reasonably high-end sensors makes transitioning between them about as seamless as I've seen on Android. There's Nightscape Video 2.0, which makes for undeniably cleaner low-light footage. It can shoot 8K video at 30 FPS, though I'm still struggling to see the benefit in most lighting conditions. And that new ultra-wide camera, it also doubles as what I would call a solid 6 out of 10 macro camera. And the OnePlus 9 Pro can do one better. This shot right here, yes, I've got a new kitten, he is adorable. This was taken in low light. It just gets more information in photos than the non-Pro, and laser autofocus means it's more likely to be pin sharp. Plus, I like the fact that OnePlus isn't jumping around with the kind of things that they put their efforts into. You get some smartphone companies who one year say zoom is the best thing in the world, for example, and then the next year they just kind of move on and scrap that old feature. What? The OnePlus 9 Pro has basically taken the OnePlus 8 Pro and improved everything, which also means it's kept the optical zoom camera, but made it better. It can do 3.3 times magnification at full quality, which means that as long as you've got good lighting, you can get to about 10 times without it looking like anything's off. Is this the best camera you can get on a phone? Well, it's up there. But I've got a camera battle coming tomorrow versus the S21 Ultra, and I think it's going to be epic. I think it's going to answer any question you could possibly have about the OnePlus 9 Pro camera. But I think the important thing to remember for this video is that the Hasselblad collaboration is probably causing more problems than it's solving. You see, when a smartphone company works with a big camera brand, it can mean a lot of different things. Like when Huawei worked with Leica, they basically said to them, you do it. They gave Leica free rein with everything from which sensors were used, to how the lenses should be built, to what kind of feel the end images should have. And as a result, I remember that the first time I used a Leica branded Huawei phone, I could tell. The images had a very distinct quality to them, even down to the style of portrait mode. When Sony worked with Zeiss, they integrated Zeiss's signature T-Star anti-reflective glass for better optics. But that's not really what's happening here. What it feels like is that OnePlus has already decided what lenses and sensors they want, and they've just said to Hasselblad, well, you can have some say over colors. But ironically, colors are probably the weakest part of this camera. Again, you'll see this properly in the camera battle tomorrow, but sometimes these phones are oversaturated, sometimes they can completely crush darker areas, and at night, I couldn't help but feel like it was making skies very blue, like Disney film blue. Plus, this whole Hasselblad collaboration, it's all about consistent color, right? The way it was quoted to me is that it means that the OnePlus 9 phones will have supremely exact color standards. But if you take one photo on the OnePlus 9 and then the exact same photo on the Pro, half the time they look completely different to each other. This calibration was Hasselblad's one job. So, to clarify, these are good camera systems for their respective prices. I'm just saying that you can A, pretty much forget the fact that the Hasselblad logo's on here, and B, you can knock one camera off either of these phones. Because technically the OnePlus 9 is a triple camera, and the OnePlus 9 Pro is a quad camera, but for both of them, one of those cameras is a 2 megapixel monochrome sensor that in some cases might help you to take more accurate black and white photos. If you open up the camera, go into filters and scroll right till the end to activate it. I mean, here's a photo using the monochrome sensor, and one without using it. I'll let you decide if it's something that you care about. Okay, so should you buy these phones? Well, if you watched my Oppo Find X3 Pro review, I basically said, hang on, because OnePlus is probably about to come out with something that is about as good, but cheaper. And that's pretty much what's happened here. From the screens, to the cameras, to the specs. But what's kind of surprising here is how much cheaper. When I first got given these phones, I didn't actually get given a price. And so I was looking at other devices from Samsung and Xiaomi and Asus and other competitors, trying to work out how cheap they would need to be, such that I would recommend them. And it turns out they're quite a bit below that threshold. I would rather have this OnePlus 9 Pro that's $829, or let's just say $900 for the sake of getting the higher storage option, than the Find X3 Pro, which is $1,100. Or I would rather have the base OnePlus 9 that's $629 than just about any other phone under $750. Fundamentally because it makes cuts in what I think are the right places. Like, they've gone for Gorilla Glass 5 instead of the very latest Gorilla Glass Victus. Things like having splash resistance, but not paying extra to get an official IP certification. Things like slower wireless charging. They're the kind of omissions that you would notice if you were looking for them, but you probably wouldn't if you weren't. Okay, think about this for a second. Your location, your exact operating system, every hardware detail about the device you're on right now, as well as all your past browsing history. These are things that you'd want to keep to yourself, right? Because if someone had all of this information, they'd be able to know exactly who you were. Well, this is how much information a website immediately knows about you the second you click on it. And to be honest, if it's a website you trust, then it's fine. But there's probably a fair few that you wouldn't want to know these details. And that is where Surfshark VPN comes in. It's not just like the most affordable way that I've seen to keep yourself anonymous, it's just over $2 a month for as many people and devices as you want, but there's another perk. Because you can effectively pick the location that you want your device to be, I can, for example, pick the United States and watch US TV shows. You can effectively have the Netflix exclusives for every single region without leaving your home. Like if I wanted to watch Batman The Dark Knight, I just switch to Canada, and I can do that. So check the link in the description, and if you use the code BOSS, then you get an 83% discount and 3 months for free. So, thank you so much for watching. My name is Aaron, this is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you in the next one.